Good afternoon, guys, and welcome to the podcast. I'm really delighted about today's guest from Indianapolis, Edie, and she's going to talk to us about all about business growth, business entrepreneurship, scaling with the principles of doing less, beating burnout, energetics, and I'm really happy to have her on to discuss these concepts. Edie, welcome.
Thank you, doctor. I appreciate it.
Yeah, we're very informal, so everybody calls me Chris. And yeah, briefly introduce yourself. And I really love how you talk about how you incorporate energy and just the way these systems and preventing burnout and nervous system. So talk about your journey and what you're doing now.
Definitely. Thank you, Chris. My name is Edie, founder of Oduraa, House of Oduraa, and I help creative founders serve more clients with ease through systems that feel good and also perform elegantly. And my background is actually in civil engineering, where I guess my structured side comes from. And I've been helping businesses grow and operationalize since about 2019. But along my journey, I began to tap into, learn, and experience the power of the unseen in the sense of how our energy works in business, our ebbs and flows, cyclical living, all of these different concepts that when we don't pay attention to, we can have the best business strategy, but burn out and perhaps get to the top of the mountain, but recognize that our relationships, our health, etc., have not come along with us. And so I help founders who want to build their businesses with tangible techniques, systems, and processes, but also with the less tangible but equally important elements like their own well being, their ethical compass, right? Their soul and their spark. And so that's the foundation of what I do.
Yeah, fascinating. And so when you arrived on these concepts, because a lot of people, a lot of the listeners and viewers, they're very right brain analytical. They're doctors, lawyer, dentists, accountants, and they may not be in tune with these concepts that you're talking about. So do they need to be, the people listening to this need to be intuitives or empaths to understand these concepts, or is this something that can be developed?
Yes, absolutely. This is something that can be developed and really that I think that everybody interacts with whether we know it or not. When we talk about energy, even just think about eating a heavy meal and for lunch and how you feel afterwards and how those meetings go that you're sitting in, right? And that's very biological, but that's tapping into something that's less intuitive, less about systems and structure, but very much impacts the cycles of your work and your efficacy, right? We think about things like sleep and diet that are a bit easier to grasp. And when we move down this spectrum, we can think of some of these other elements and aspects as in similar terms where they may not be directly related to the specific task at hand, but they impact and influence our work. Another great example is the environment that we work in. Like my window's open and it impacts the visuals a little bit, but it helps me be more energetic and present in such a way that it's worth the trade-off. But if you think about working in a basement with those little bitty windows versus working in a cathedral type space, we can feel in ourselves immediately that difference, even just hearing that. And so when we talk about energy and some of these more, it feels like intuitive things, it can feel less easy to grasp, but we are interacting in this way constantly.
Interesting. So then one question I have for you is these ideas, what is the first step in attuning your nervous system to these, like for example, lighting, sound, how you feel, to prime your body for optimal performance?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so. I wouldn't call them two different approaches, but there's two different angles that you can vacillate between to get the best result. One is starting with existing literature and dialogue around these concepts and see where people recommend starting. So for me, for example, every workday I have a work startup ritual. And so everybody has this to a degree. We all do something when we start work, right? It may be popping into our inbox and responding and reacting to them, to all the messages we have. It may be looking at our task list and stressing, right? But for me, I've intentionally cultivated a work startup ritual that includes setting my space, making sure the space looks nice. I have a candle lit right here, some incense going. So I'm engaging with the aspects of myself. And so that's just one example where for somebody who is okay, this is real. I'm interested in learning more about this. You can see what already exists and what people are doing and experiment and play. On the other side as well, one of the big things you can do as well is to get curious. Just get curious with yourself and your response to different spaces. If you're working in your office one day, just get curious. Like, how am I feeling about this space? Do I feel tense? What are my shoulders doing? How is my desk set up in such a way? How is my desk set up? And what is it leading me to do with my body and how do I feel about working? Versus, okay, when I'm doing a bit of quick work in my home office, how does it feel? The windows are open, it's more comfortable. How does that impact me? And by getting curious in different situations and around our physical space, even with our technology, that's something that I love to do, getting curious about how I feel when I open my inbox and when I open maybe my personal Gmail versus my work Outlook. How does that feel? Just getting curious about how these different elements of our business and our lives impact our emotions and our somatic response is a great way to begin getting attuned and just recognizing before trying to change anything or add anything, just seeing where things stand and how things are impacting you.
Interesting. The other one thing is really interesting is because you talked about reaching the peak in the mountain of either career, business, financial success, and at the expense of your unhealthy, angry, and divorced, etc.
Yeah.
And if a person listening or viewing this is, yeah, they have their sleep, they have their diet, they have their body, they have their relationships dialed in, but like on the flip side is like they can't get their business going, they can't get they have no income. What's going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, granularly, there's probably a million and one reasons why. I do think that a lot of angst can come when we are overly prescriptive, when I like to say, should ourselves to death, and we try to apply systems and structures. I'm big on systems and structures, but I do believe that when we try to apply some that do not fit us, we won't get the results we want, right? And same for business growth. If you believe that you have to have a 10-step funnel and this automated and that automated, but that really doesn't work for who you are and who you're trying to serve, you're going to run into frustration and run into issues. And again, curiosity is such a powerful tool. I find getting curious about where I believe things are floundering in my business, also paired with the wisdom of a great coach, consultant, board of advisors. But I love to ask myself, if I was a consultant, where would I say the bottleneck is? If I was a consultant in my own business, what be the top three things that need to be audited and edited? And also, I think a big piece, so that element of really assessing where we may be trying to operate in a way that is not aligned with our best way for generating income, and also doing mindset and internal work. I don't think that just mindset work will bring you results, but I do think that if we don't believe truly, if we don't have confidence in what we're offering, if we have fear about actually supporting and serving our clients, a lot of these can hinder and sabotage the good work that we're doing. So we may be getting out there, writing blog posts, getting on podcasts, and getting on social media networking, but our lack of confidence is causing us to not say the things that need to be said that would help us stand apart from the other lawyers or practitioners that are out there. We are not writing the content that people would be interested in because we're afraid to stand in our own authority. So I think both the inner energetics and the inner world for people, as well as trying to operate out of a framework that doesn't work for us, are some of the biggest ways that we can really hinder our growth.
Interesting. And the one of the topics that you love to talk about is the role that energy plays in business. And how is the role that energy plays in business different than feng shui?
Yeah, and I love feng shui. I have somebody who laid out my room for me with feng shui, and it made a difference. I think feng shui is just one tool for acknowledging and letting energy work in our favor. So they're not necessarily separate, if that makes sense, but it's a double click into energy. So with business, I think the overarching concept is that energy does matter. And in the sense of both your business's energy and your own energy. And this might be a little bit far out for some people, but I do like to think of my business as its own entity at times, and not just a collection of my activities and efforts and software, but really this entity that is here to do something, right? Because most of our businesses have a purpose, and I think all of ours do, in terms of, I think, a positive purpose. I would hope most of your listeners have a positive purpose with their business. And being able to understand that is a big, obviously the business is a part of us, is an extension of our own vision for the world and our lives, but is also, it has its own unique purpose separate from us, right? We are not our businesses. And when it comes to energy, I like to think on that high level sense of recognizing that there are more levers to pull than just, like I mentioned, the activities and the systems and the processes, but we can attend to what is also not as clearly seen. And one of the big ways I love doing this with clients to make it a bit more tangible is a little bit of what I talked about. When you're operating in different parts of your business, when you're accessing your business, you're working in your business. How are you feeling? What is your energy? What are your friction points? And that's actually a big part of auditing for inconsistencies and inefficiencies in the business. Yes, we have our standard diagnostic tools that are very cerebral and very on the paper chart kind of things. But then there's also the element of, okay, do you feel good in your business? Because that matters, right? If you're generating a whole bunch of income, it makes it a little easier to tolerate not feeling great in your business. But in the long run, it really wears on us, right? And so accessing energy in our business can look like, as I was talking about that example of, when we're looking at scaling, not just saying, okay, what do we think needs to be automated? What do people typically automate? What software is out there? It also looks like, okay, what is my bodily response to these different processes? Where am I feeling constricted? What feels icky? What feels like a dank basement that I don't want to touch? And paying attention to those elements and those aspects. And also recognizing that yes, our like cerebral strategy gets us far and it's necessary. And our intuition has a part to play because nobody has done exactly what we're doing. Nobody has our exact experience. And so while we acknowledge that, okay, we're heading in this direction, we add nuance and we color in the painting with our intuition and our embodied sense of, okay, with this business, I feel like this is the direction we need to go in. This is how I think we're going to get to that direction. So I said a whole lot there, but that's some just like little pieces and threads of what it looks like to interact in your business beyond just the cerebral or the tangible, if that makes sense.
Interesting. The other question, because again, a lot of the audience are doctor, lawyer, dentist, accountant, engineers, and then a lot of high achievers. Control is the ultimate thing. And you talk about stop holding it all and helping entrepreneurs, business owners build a business that holds them. What does that look like?
Yeah, absolutely. I think so many of us are frankly slaves to our business, slaves to our careers, where, yeah, we're stressed out. We have GI issues, headaches, we're missing sleep because we're so stressed and overwhelmed. And at that point, who is driving the ship? Not us. The person driving the ship is not the one stressed and up late at night stressing. The business is driving us. And so building a business that holds us is one, taking a step back and recognizing that it's a piece of the pie. And it's hard to say that sometimes, right? When it's our sole source of income, but recognizing that there is so much outside of it and making sure that we are actually cultivating that, right? Cultivating a beautiful life outside of our business, outside of our career. But then the second part of that is it I'll say it and then I'll backtrack a little bit. But the second part of that is recognizing that because this is the case, that the business serves people, like I'm serving people through my business and it serves me. I am not a slave to my business. We want to put in the structure in we want to put in place the structure that makes that a reality. And for a lot of people who are high achievers, my background is in civil engineering. I get it. I understand. It is hard to relinquish control because we got to where we got to through the work that we've done, through having our hands in everything. But there comes a plateau and a point where we have a choice to make, whether we want to continue scaling and growing through force, through effort, through us as a sacrifice, like our energy, our time, our bodies being the coal that fuels the engine. Or if we want to pull a different lever and lean into leverage where we're leveraging other people's energy, other people's time, other people's skills and software, and not in a extractive or bad way, but people who enjoy doing the things that maybe we don't enjoy doing, or software that runs better than we possibly could. But it comes to this crossroads of deciding whether the pain of learning how to surrender and trust is more manageable and more like interesting or appealing to us than the pain of continuing to be overwhelmed and struggling and stressed. And so hitting that crossroads and answering that question and if you select the route of I'm willing to sit in the discomfort of no longer being the main pilot or no longer having my hands on everything and learning how to trust. If we select that and go on that, honestly, oftentimes feels like a dark night of the soul, if your viewers are familiar with that term, but just like very disorienting, growing season, what we're able to emerge with on the other side is a business that holds us, and which means a business that has the structure, the support that allows us to flourish and allows us to not sacrifice all these aspects of ourselves to keep it running. It becomes a more communal thing by the very nature of getting more support. It becomes more communal, becomes even more heart-centered, I believe.
Interesting. And we have around several minutes remaining. What are some of your favorite tools? You mentioned rituals that help entrepreneurs hold more, and the energetics meet infrastructure with, and growing their business from ease and not hustle.
Yeah. I the work startup ritual I mentioned and then the work shutdown ritual are so key for me. And it's taken me some time to get a good ritual for me. And it's nothing, I don't have a hour and a half morning ritual. Some people do that. I have kids, I cannot do young kids, I cannot do that. Mine is like 5 to 10 minutes. And same for the shutdown ritual. But the beauty of it is that it really creates this container around my time. And the work startup ritual helps me get in the mentality, not just the mentality of working, but also the energy of it. And for me, part of it is visualizing my goals and visualizing what it feels like, what it will be like when they're achieved, when I've helped this many people, when I've hit this income level. And from that energy and that excitement and that passion, I then go into my work and I'm able to bring that mentality into what I'm writing and the podcast I'm showing up at. I'm in the essence of Edie, who has already achieved those goals. And that's great energy to be in. And then the work shutdown ritual, which for me is very simple, is tactical things like closing out my tabs, reassigning and redating some tasks that I could not get to. But then also just a short invocation that I don't remember off the top of my head, but it's something like I've done enough. My rest is restorative. Like I make money in my sleep, stuff like that, where it's like, okay, it's enough. It's good. And I shut my laptop. And that really signals to me, especially somebody who works primarily from home, it really signals to me that I'm done. It's enough. It's okay. I've done what I need to do during the day. And one of the things that makes that effective is actually defining very clearly what are the things I need to do every day to get where I want to go. And so I do those things and then I shut the computer and I move on and I go and enjoy the beautiful life that I'm creating. Another tool, and this will be the last one, is second brain. That term was coined by Tiago Forte, and it's really just the concept of having a dynamic repository for all your tasks, your notes, etc., and keeping up with that. Relieving the mental load of having to remember everything is one of the biggest shifts and biggest energy ways you can gain energy back, is not having to hold all these loose ends. And so whether you use Apple Notes or you use something like Todoist, which I love, or Asana, having a place where all of your tasks are can make such a big difference and also supports, yeah, all the other work you're doing. So both in the energetics with the work startup and shutdown rituals, and then the tangible of get a second brain, get a software that's holding all these other things for you. Those are, I think, some of the two biggest ways people can just be supported in their businesses.
Excellent. And people listening to this, if they resonated with you, how can they connect with you, follow you, reach out to you, and work with you?
Absolutely. I am primarily active on my blog at this time, so they can reach me at my website, edithoduraa.me. Yeah, and I might get on LinkedIn soon. I had a whole mix up with that, but I'm hoping to get back on LinkedIn in the next couple months. So as of now, edithoduraa.me on my newsletter and LinkedIn, hopefully in the future.
Excellent. Thanks so much for coming on, and I really enjoyed talking with you.
Thank you so much.